Listeners, beware. This podcast contains themes of the macabre and does not shy away from the details. Our content is graphic and our language is colorful. We might not be your cup of tea, so listener discretion is strongly advised. You have tuned in to The Killer Tea, a podcast hosted by two best friends with a proclivity to decipher the deeply demented minds of murderers. Welcome to episode 1 of season 2 of The Killer Tea. On today's episode, we will be discussing Edward Theodore Gein, the Butcher of Plainfield.
We are your hosts, Chelsea.
And Christina.
Welcome to season 2.
We made it to season 2 and I'm very uncomfortable.
Why are you so uncomfortable, Christina?
Gee, Chelsea, there's a fucking global pandemic going on, and for the first time since October?
Yeah.
This is the first time that we've ever tried to do this remotely, and you're not here, and I'm not looking at you, and I'm in my office, and I'm uncomfortable, and this is weird.
Yeah, this is very, very strange. I'm currently sitting in my bedroom at my makeup vanity with the microphone on the side of my vanity. I've got a little phone holder thingy holding my phone up. I can't see my laptop properly because the microwave, oh my god, the microphone is in the way, and my allergies are killing me, so I sound like a bullfrog.
So what we've actually done here is we kind of Jimmy rigged this whole remote podcasting setup where actually I have Chelsea, we called each other on our iPhones and we're listening to each other talk in the headphones, and then we are recording in GarageBand like we normally would and hoping that these audios will work out.
If not, this episode is gonna be late.
Yeah, I mean, we're trying to practice safe social distancing.
Corona.
And even though Corona. And even though we're best friends who basically spend all of our free time together anyways, we don't want to risk any more exposure. So we are being fucking responsible adults right now.
We are being goddamn patriotic is what we're doing.
I mean, thank you guys for tuning in. I know you really don't have much else to do. If you're, well, especially if you're in North Carolina or Ohio or San Francisco.
Or literally any of the other states that are shut the fuck down right now.
We've got the SIP order, the shelter in place.
Well, you do, I don't. I live
We're
in
in
a
different
county.
Your county is going to get it soon, so.
Oh, yeah.
Who knows? Well, anyways, that's enough Corona talk. Let's talk more murder instead of tragic death.
Yeah.
I mean, this is all true. You know what I mean. Let's just talk about serial killers to make us feel better about the world's pandemic.
Oh, my God.
Oh, God. Okay, so, Chelsea, do you want to set the scene?
Sure, I'll set the scene.
All right, give me a mood. Give me a moment.
I'm gonna give you a mood. We're going to Wisconsin. La Crosse County, to be specific. On August 27th of 1906, Ed Gein, or Edward Theodore Gein, whichever you prefer, was born to George and Augusta Gein, and he had one older brother named Henry. And I would just like to point out that Ed Gein is also a Virgo, like myself, much like the other serial killers that we've talked about. His mother was a real piece of shit.
Good old Eddie had this wonderful, sweet, timid mother. JK. Her name was Augusta Wilhelmine. I'm not even going to try that maiden name. Lurke?
Yeah, you're on your own there, boo.
His dad, George Philip Gein, was 23 when he met his mother, Augusta, who was 19. They were married on December 4th, 1899. And the marriage was rocky from the get-go because good old Georgie boy was an alcoholic. I know.
Shocking.
You are totally astounded by this revolutionary fact. No serial killer ever came out of alcoholic parents.
And not
Bizarre.
only was he an alcoholic, he also had a really hard time holding down a job, which really infuriated Augusta.
And Augusta is this borderline fanatic religious woman. I'm doing air quotes. She is a devout Christian. She practiced this really extreme misogynistic outlook on the world, and she kind of projected that onto her husband, who she hated. And then she also, as the boys are born, projects this onto them as well.
My notes literally say Augusta held deep contempt for her husband.
I mean, it's like doing the research. Now, granted, this is going all the way back to, what did I say, 1899?
Yeah.
So there's not a ton of information available, but what is available goes into great lengths to make you understand that she fucking hates this dude. And she would talk to him like he was a piece of shit. So she was like fire and brimstone, Old Testament, Book of Revelations Christian. They had a terrible sex life because she had all these crazy extreme beliefs on fornication, and that she thought that fornication outside of just trying to produce a child was the most disgusting of sins. She even saw like having sex together as a married couple, like an example of vile lust, and it was just some duty that a woman had to do to serve her husband, and she absolutely held him in contempt for that. So that's kind of where I think a lot of her hatred comes
she
from.
would often preach to the boys about the quote-unquote innate immorality of the world, the evil of drinking, and she held a firm belief that all women, except for herself,
Of course,
were prostitutes and instruments of the devil.
Yeah, she's special.
She's a real peach.
I did read that the Book of Revelations was part of her favorite part of the Bible. So, I mean, I know you didn't really grow up in the church reading the Bible, Chelsea, but there's some really juicy shit that goes on in there. So I'm not super surprised. But one thing, because you and I have talked about Ed Gein before on the podcast, and we both know a lot about him.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like if you're a true crime person, you just know about him. You've learned about him.
You know who this dude is.
Yeah, exactly. So I was surprised when doing research that I actually learned new things about him. Yeah, I did not realize that Augusta had secretly hoped for a female child, that she really, really, really wanted a girl. Considering how much she fucking hates women, I was really shocked to find that she thought that a female child would be easier to bring up with the Christian faith, and that she would be more chaste and virgin-like and obedient.
Yeah.
But yeah, she was really pissed off when Ed was born because she thought that she was going to get a girl.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, I had not heard that, so I was quite surprised.
So the family's very religious. Divorce is not an option for this very unhealthy marriage.
No.
Augusta is bringing these two boys up in a world that she deems to be full of sin, fire and brimstone, all that, and would often reserve time in the afternoons when the boys are small to read them passages from the Bible. And she would often select the most graphic verses from the Old Testament to read to them.
Yep.
You know, just to nice and recap it all there for you.
How to traumatize your small child.
Yeah. Augusta, in order to support her family, has to work a lot because, George can't hold down a job because he's drunk. And so she operates a small grocery store.
She controlled her husband so much that she convinced him to buy that grocery store, and it was supposed to be his responsibility. So this was her answer to his alcoholism and him jumping from job to job, was if they just owned a grocery store, that would just be what they did. So even in that respect, she kind of controlled him. But that didn't work out the way that she had planned, because she ended up being the one doing all the work while he kept drinking. So that idea wasn't great. But eventually, she got so disgusted with lacrosse that she labeled lacrosse like the modern day Sodom and Gomorrah, and said, you know what, we're getting out of here. There's sluts and skanks everywhere. Like, this is the worst place in the world.
Because, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. They're them loose moral ladies. So I made an interesting observation that may or may not play into this later, but I wanted to do a little footnote right here. She talks a lot about the book of Genesis to her sons. And again, the Sodom and Gomorrah thing, I just thought was interesting, because there's this guy named Lot, right? And he's got these 2 daughters. Sodom and Gomorrah gets destroyed, and Lot and his 2 daughters are forced to live in a cave. This is a really weird time, okay?
Where's this going, Christina?
Lot's 2 daughters are like, hey, let's get dad drunk and sleep with him to preserve our family line, because, God killed...
Sorry. Are we talking about the Bible right now?
Yes, we are. Because, God came and was like, hey, Sodom, Gomorrah, I'm annihilating y'all. You're dead. And so that killed all of Lot's people.
So
there's no men.
So there's all... I'm sorry. What?
Listen, Old Testament God was a really interesting fellow.
Yeah. I'm a much bigger fan of hippie Jesus and all what he has to offer.
So, my curiosity was wondering if potentially Augusta may have laid with her children to keep their line pure, or because she viewed that as acceptable and holy, and maybe that may have played into some of the trauma that we're going to get into later.
I actually heard a story that I think is going to play into that trauma. So we realize this is the world that Ed is growing up in. He's got a very twisted view of the world being thrown at him.
And he's still a small boy at this point.
Yeah, and he's still a little boy. Ed's peers and teachers even claimed that as a child, Ed was weird. They said that he would laugh randomly. He was very socially awkward, which I don't really think was necessarily Ed's fault.
No, his mother practiced isolation with her children, with all of them, really.
The boys weren't even allowed to leave the farm unless they were going to school. And then Augusta would severely prohibit the boys from making friends and would even punish them if they tried to.
Yeah, she viewed everyone as fornicators and sinners. But okay, so you mentioned the farm. She decides that this place is like Sodom and Gomorrah, and she uproots the entire family and forces her husband to sell the grocery store. Mm-hmm. And they find this 200-acre farm in Plainfield. They move, and this is a fantastic opportunity for her to, again, air quotes, protect her children and keep everyone in isolation. On top of it, she emasculates their father in front of them. So their whole social boundaries and everything that they have are totally bizarre.
Now, I couldn't find anything to back this up. I just heard it talked about in one of the videos I was listening to while doing our research on Ed. Mm-hmm. And there was this one story that Ed talks about when he was 12. His mother caught him masturbating in the bath, and she poured boiling water on his genitals to punish him for it.
Oh shit, I had never heard of that.
I heard it in one video. I couldn't find anything to back it up. So whether or not that's true, I'm not sure. But, I mean, I wouldn't have put that past her. Which could also explain a lot of the trauma that he had.
Yeah, he wasn't described as a village idiot or an unintelligent person, despite all this weird social isolation.
Yeah, he did okay in school.
Him being off, I think, doesn't... I mean, who can say for sure, but I think it is his environment. I don't think he was born with any disabilities.
No, I don't think so either. I think a lot of his weirdness definitely comes from the way he was raised.
Yeah, that when they eventually tested him, he had an average IQ. Again, it wasn't like he was an idiot or anything, but when people would talk about him, they would say he was the nicest guy ever. He was just odd.
Right.
So,
We don't know a whole heck of a lot about Ed as a teenager. Just that, him and his brothers did a lot of odd jobs to kind of help with the farm. The farm was their main source of survival. I didn't hear much about Henry, but Ed was definitely known to be kind of a
mama's boy.
A big mama's boy and an oddball.
Henry, from what I had heard, was as he got older, he started distancing himself from his mother because he did not share her beliefs and he wanted to go out and see the world. And so a lot of times him and Ed, while still friendly, would bump heads. They didn't see eye to eye, and he certainly didn't see eye to eye with his mother, but they still all lived together all the way up until...
That takes us all the way to 1940. So if we're looking at the timeline here, at this point, Ed is 43.
He wasn't in his 40s yet because he was born in 1906 and his dad died in 1940.
Oh, so then he would have been 34. I'm sorry.
But I mean,
a little bit off there.
He may as well have been in his 50s because considering that time period, if you weren't married and out of the house by 18, something was wrong with you.
Right. George, his father, ends up dying of a heart attack, which is probably the nicest gift he ever gave to Augusta, let's be real.
Because of his passing, the brothers have to step in. I guess in this circumstance, the sons have to step in and do a bunch of odd jobs to try and make money. As they started to get older, Henry was like, okay, Eddie is really weird with mom.
Oh yeah, he would even point it out to Ed that like, hey, it's not cool what mom's doing. Like, it's not okay the way she views the world. Like, you need to move on. You need to get away from her. She's doing, she's putting bad things in your head.
And whenever he would say that, Ed would be like so shocked and appalled. He thought the absolute world of his mother. Even though his mother was abusive, he thought she was the kindest, most pure thing to ever exist. So the fact that his brother was saying this totally blew his mind.
So the boys are out doing odd jobs to help with the expenses, and the community really liked Ed and Henry. They thought they were reliable, they were honest and good workers. Weird side note, but one of Ed's most frequent side jobs was,
oh my God,
babysitting.
I know, isn't that bizarre?
He loved kids, and I don't mean he loved kids in like a bad way. I mean like this dude legitimately just loved kids and got along better with children than he did adults.
Yeah. Henry and Eddie and their mom were all living together. And then one day, Henry and Ed are out in the yard doing routine maintenance. They're clearing brush, doing what farmers do to clear the land at this time of year.
Right.
Then, brush fire gets out of control. Ed supposedly loses track of his brother in this brush fire, and he can't find him. And so he runs and goes to try and find help.
He loses track of Henry, needs help extinguishing this fire, so he goes and gets the firefighters. Firefighters come, they get the fire put out, and Ed says, hey, I can't find Henry. We were separated. I don't know what happened to him. And so they're like, okay, we'll call the police. Let's do a search. Ed leads them directly to Henry's body, directly to it, and Henry was dead.
They never confirmed that he killed his brother, but it's widely suspected that he did.
The county coroner ended up listing Henry's death as asphyxiation, but he had a lot of bruises and kind of trauma to his head area. And so a lot of investigators suspected that Ed killed his brother, but no charges were ever filed or anything like that against him. So there really wasn't any proof that he did.
From what I read, everyone was basically like, look, they've already been through enough. We're not gonna push it.
Right. Which
this was a different world. It was a different world. Not that that makes it okay, but it was a different world.
So now we've got Eddie living alone with his mother.
He wanted Augusta, his mom, all to himself. He wanted all of her attention.
Something that I found interesting, and this kind of ties back into Henry's death, but I read that Henry had been dating a divorced single mother of 2.
Oh, yeah.
And had been planning on moving in with her. I'm almost wondering if Augusta hadn't been saying something to Ed about how horrible Henry is and how sinful he is, and Ed took it upon himself to be like, let me take care of that for you, mama.
Yeah. I mean, he himself could have even been so disgusted with it, which if he did it, I think his disgust for what his brother, the unholy things that his brother was doing, paired with the wanting all of his mother's attention, could be the reasons why, could be the motive.
Yeah.
However, it does kind of go against his modus operandi.
It does, but I mean, his modus operandi is kind of fucking weird in and of itself.
So this is where, if you didn't think it was weird before, fucking buckle up, pack a lunch. We're gonna be here a while because shit's getting straight fucking crazy.
Yeah. I do have one story before we move on to the super cray-cray.
Okay.
Is in 1945, Gein told authorities that him and his mom had visited a man named Smith to purchase straw, and there was a woman present at the farm, and Smith is beating the shit out of this dog, right? Like, beat this dog to death. And his mother is absolutely horrified, but not because Smith literally beat a dog to death in front of them, but because there was another woman present on this farm that was not Smith's wife.
And she had come running out.
And she called this woman Smith's harlot.
Oh my God.
Ed is being subjected to this absolute insanity, and at this point, he is almost 40. Like, he's 39. After this is where we really start sliding downhill quickly in Ed's mental stability.
He was in a serial killer cocoon before, right?
Yeah.
And now he's starting to blossom into something else. He gonna be a serial killer butterfly.
Shortly after Henry's death, Augusta is not feeling well. She's feeling, kind of out of it. She's not doing well. Ed takes her to the doctor, and she's had a stroke. This stroke paralyzes her in some aspect. And now Ed is basically forced to take care of her in every single way possible. And I say forced, but he's more than happy to take care of his mother. Oh yeah, he's
elated. He gets to be subservient to her and be her caretaker and bring her back to health. I mean, this is like perfect for him. So under Eddie's administrations, she starts to recover a little bit. She's able to walk around the house and do some chores around the farm. She would ask Ed to read the Bible to her in bed like she used to do to Henry and Edward. But then, so that little story that you just told, I heard that this is what causes her to have the stress of that happening and her being so upset with how immoral the Smith's man was, caused her to have another stroke. Not the beating the dog to death, but like the woman there. And this stroke is what Ed actually credits to taking her life.
Yeah, on December 29th of 1945, she died following what I've seen as a series of strokes.
Okay.
This gets crazy. At the funeral, there were some neighbors there and a couple of Augusta's siblings. Like, there were people at her funeral. And Ed was so beside himself, like snot running down his face, hysterical, like he's lost his shit, crying. And is quoted as saying that he lost his only friend and one true love, and he was absolutely alone in the world. Like, that's a direct quote.
This is what I mean, dude. Is this Lot 2.0? Like, did they do bad stuff together? It's so creepy.
I don't think so, because Ed claims that he was a virgin up until the time that he died. But I think there was some serious, like, almost Stockholm syndrome.
Oh, yeah. Oh my God, what is that Freudian, it's based off of the Greek story. What is that called?
I don't know which one you're talking.
Oh my God. Sigmund Freud, he had this whole Oedipus complex, which is this weird belief that children have this innate physical attachment to their parents that is potentially sexual, and that they actually combat other males for their mother's attention at a very, very young primal age. And then they grow and overcome that. And that's part of what makes them manly.
Okay.
But,
well, to be fair, all of Sigmund Freud's theories revolve around sex.
Yeah,
so
he never had any qualms about
he was a strange dude
out there.
But I completely forgot about this. In one of the podcasts that I was listening to about Ed, I think it was Serial Killers, they talked about a story when Ed was like a teenager, like young teens, and that he walked out into the barn where his mom and dad were butchering a hog. And he watched his mom gut the hog. As its guts were spilling out of its body, he ejaculated.
Oh my God, I had never heard that.
They speculated that this may have made a connection in his brain with his mom and blood and sexual satisfaction.
That's fucking weird.
Yeah, I mean, they pull a lot of stories that I normally don't find elsewhere, so I'm very interested in their sources. But you know, they're a big time podcast, and I'm sure they have access to a lot of things that, you know, we may not be able to find on the Google. So
on the Google. Yeah, okay. So I guess my whole point in bringing that thing around was that there's actually something to this psychology or psychopathy.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, Freud was a weird dude, but he kind of knew what he was talking about a little bit.
In case anybody is interested in learning more about that theory, even though I butchered the fuck out of it, sorry, I was tapping into really, really old information that was locked in my brain. Go ahead and give that a search and see if maybe you think it applies to Ed Gein, because I know that's probably something somebody else has brought up somewhere along the line. They're just smarter than I am. Ed managed to keep the farm, and instead of maintaining it, he would just do odd jobs around town, which is basically how he became the town handyman and how everyone got really familiar with him.
But he also does something else that's really fucking weird. He boards up all the rooms that were used by his mother, leaving them exactly as she left them, and then begins living off of a small room that's next to the kitchen. And he lets the rooms that he lives in become disgusting. He becomes a hoarder, essentially.
When Augusta was alive, she was a fanatic about religion and a fanatic about cleaning their house. That shit was sparkling all the time. It's something that he commented on, and now it was absolutely he straight up wouldn't let people in for that reason and for other reasons.
Ed actually, for entertainment, starts reading death cult magazines and adventure stories. And he was really into stories that involved cannibals.
And Nazis.
Yeah, and there was one Nazi doctor. I can't remember her name now, and I didn't write it down.
I can't remember either. We're going to call her Dr. Finkelstein.
Yeah, but she was famous for being a sadomasochist in the concentration camps and would frequently make prisoners have sex with her.
Oh, good.
And did some really horrific torture shit. I mean, she's a Nazi, so one, she's already a garbage human.
Yeah.
But now we're adding sadomasochism on top of it, so, you know.
Akko taco.
He was, like, really into her.
This feels so uncomfortable when you say it out loud.
Yeah, but between 1946 and 1956, he ended up selling an 80-acre parcel of land that had technically belonged to Henry, and this also helped supplement money that he was making as a handyman. That takes us to November 16th of 1957.
Murder, 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 murder.
Murder!
Bernice Worden was a jovial, stocky lady, well liked by her community.
German.
German. She was very German, and she reminded Eddie of his mom. So, of course, that's not going to be good for her.
No. On November 16th, residents reported that the store had been closed all day, but they saw the store's truck leave around 9:30, so they just figured, oh, they're off hunting, it's no big deal. While her son, Frank Worden,
It's actually a sheriff.
comes to the store around 5 to kind of figure out what the hell is going on, and finds that the store's cash register is open with money missing, and there's a blood stain on the floor that actually leads all the way outside. You know, fucking weird. Obviously, Frank's the sheriff. He's not allowed to investigate this. So he told the people that were investigating this that Ed Gein had been in the store the evening before and had said that he would return the next morning for a gallon of antifreeze. So they're kind of looking around trying to see what's going on, and there was actually a sales slip, which, you know, is just basically an old school receipt for a gallon of antifreeze, and that was the last receipt that was written by Bernice. It was made out to Ed.
Worden actually, when he called the other police officers, he said specifically, he's done something to her. And then they asked who, and he replied, Eddie Gein.
Yep.
There was no doubt in Frank's mind that it actually was Ed. The other reason why he was able to figure out that it was Ed was that Ed had been pursuing Bernice, and
Yeah, he'd asked her for a couple dates.
he had annoyed her with it. She wasn't interested, and she had actually complained about this to Frank. And then that is the other part of the reason why Frank was kind of shining a spotlight on Ed.
You're right, I forgot about that. So that same day, Ed was picked up and arrested while he was at a grocery store, and they took him back to his farm. That is where the horror story begins. Do we need a trigger warning here?
Yeah.
This is a lot of stuff.
All right, guys. It's been a hot second since we've done a trigger warning. We kind of dropped off with them because if you're listening to true crime, you basically know what you're getting into. But this guy inspired Buffalo Bill. He inspired the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Psycho, and Norman Bates. If that's not giving y'all any hint, it's about ready to get gory. We're just gonna go into it. So the police showed up and they decided to search the shed, and they found Worden's body hung up like a deer. She had been decapitated, was hung using a crossbar at her ankles, and then she had ropes around her wrists.
It was quoted as saying that she had been dressed like a deer. I am not from a hunting family, and I Googled what field dressing a deer is.
My brother is a hunter. It was not uncommon to go down to our lower garage and open up the door, and then there was just a deer with his chest wide open. So,
Nope.
I'm uncomfortable. So, not only that, but her body had been mutilated post-mortem, and he murdered her via gunshot, right?
She had been shot with a .22 caliber gun before everything else had been done to her. Everything else had been done post-mortem. So it's not like he hung her up and cut her open while she was alive. Like, he killed her. Okay, that doesn't really make it any better, but he didn't, torture her. He shot her.
So the police are fucking traumatized. One of them runs away and vomits. It's pretty bad. I'm looking in The Big Book of Serial Killers, an encyclopedia of serial killers by Jack Rosewood. And he provides a list of some of the things that they found in there. Are you ready?
I have the whole list.
You have the whole list too? Okay, I'll read off a few and you read off a few.
Okay.
Whole human bones and fragments. Waste bucket made of human skin covering several chair seats. Skulls on his bedpost. Female skulls with some of the tops sewn off. And then skulls used as bowls. What else do you got, Chelsea?
You leave me with the worst fucking one, you bitch.
There's more. I have more. Do you want me to keep going?
No, it's fine. So, he made a corset vest
God.
type garment
Oh.
from a female torso that had been skinned from the shoulders to the waist.
I'm uncomfortable.
Essentially, he was trying to make a female bodysuit.
And then he made leggings. You guessed it. Out of female human legs.
He had masks made from the skin of female heads.
Now here's the point where something turns. The police found Mary Hogan's face mask in a paper bag, and we haven't talked about Mary Hogan yet.
No, we haven't.
Mary Hogan went missing. Was it the year before?
I believe it was was it 1954? So a couple years prior?
Yeah.
But there was some speculation that she had been involved with crime syndicate.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though she had gone missing and they had looked for her, they hadn't put a lot of great effort into it, I guess, because they thought that her life and the way that she was living had maybe caught up to her.
Yeah, how people described her was kind of callous. It actually was very callous. They described her as this big, fat, horrible woman who cussed a lot, and that was just so uncalled for. I mean, you can describe a boisterous woman without using those words.
Yeah.
Because, she was a victim. Give her some fucking dignity.
Definitely.
People were trying to describe why Ed Gein reacted to her the way that he did. I just thought that was just horseshit, that you can describe a large woman without those adjectives. But anyways, so she would cuss. She was a big woman. She reminded him of his mother, but like the exact opposite of her personality-wise, and it offended him. I don't know if he considered what he did to be divine retribution. I don't know. But this is the first time that police correlate the two.
Right.
Because they literally just found her fucking face.
They also found Bernice Warden's entire head in a burlap sack, and her heart was in a plastic bag in front of Ed's pot-bellied stove.
There was there was 9 vulvas, salted vulvas in a shoebox. They found a young woman's dress and 2 more vulvas of females that were estimated to be around 15 years old. A belt made of female human nipples.
4 noses.
4 noses.
A pair of lips on a window shade drawstring.
A lampshade made from the skin of a human face.
Fingernails from female fingers, and a nipple doorbell. If that's not enough of a horror show for you.
Eddie's been a very busy boy.
What the fuck, Ed?
Police, they're fucking traumatized. They've never seen anything like this in their entire life. They get Ed back to the police station, and the lead investigator just loses his fucking cool and starts beating the shit out of him.
The way I heard it was that Ed refused to talk. He was just like, nope, I'm not talking. I'm not going to tell you anything. And it was like 20 some hours later when the head investigator, County Sheriff Art Schley, lost his shit because he had been inside the house. He had seen everything that he had done. He knew Bernice really well. And he lost his shit, went into the cell and physically assaulted Ed, basically.
Yeah, beat his head against a brick wall.
Yeah. This basically caused anything that Ed said to be ruled inadmissible.
Well, regardless, he did start talking.
Oh, yeah.
Ed admitted that he made many nighttime visits to the cemetery.
As many as 40 nighttime visits between the years of 1947 and 1952. And he said that he started going to the graveyards shortly after his mother died. And he would go to like talk to her at the graveyard. Well, it's also speculated that he may have dug her up like several times. Fucking weird.
This just occurred to me. One of the odd jobs that his dad had was a tanner. And you know what Ed used to do? Tan the skin.
Yeah.
I wonder if he learned from his dad how to do that.
I'm sure he did.
Fucking creepy.
Gein told investigators that he'd gone as many as 40 times to local graveyards, but about 30 of those times he said that he would like snap out of the daze that he was in and he would leave the graveyard and would go home.
Now that's a common thing about like their pre-murder phase or their after-murder phase.
But on the 10 other occasions, he dug up the graves of recently buried middle-aged women that reminded him of his mother. What he would often do is he would wait for families that had just buried their loved one.
Oh yeah, they were fresh.
Graves weren't finished, so he only had to dig a couple feet down, and he would not always take their entire body, but would sometimes just take pieces and parts.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, but then he would take their bodies home where he would tan their skin and make his whatever you want to call that shit.
A lot of people speculated whether or not he was transgender or if he was a transvestite. I don't think he was either of those things. I think he had a mental illness and was very codependent on his mother, and I think he wanted to become his mother and be as close to her as possible, and this was escapism for him.
See, and I have a slightly different theory. This is why it's so fun. His mother would often criticize him as a boy for being a boy and would tell him how evil penises are, blah, 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 because, you know, she's a nice Christian lady. My thought is that he was made to be ashamed of being a man, and he had been described when he was younger as being effeminate, having like a softer voice and more womanly characteristics. So I don't know if maybe he actually was transgender, but at that point in our history, transgender wasn't a thing. You were considered to be a transvestite and to be, you know, mentally unwell. I believe in the Netherlands, maybe. In like 1950, the first sex change operation had been done successfully. And maybe he'd heard about that.
Oh, you know, I think I do remember hearing something about that.
There's a lot of back and forth on whether he was trying to become his mother or whether he was actually transgender. I mean, obviously, like without knowing more in depth on his mental state.
We're never gonna know. We're never gonna know.
No.
What the thing that makes Ed Gein, who can quantify that?
Right.
I mean, honestly, this is so bizarre. Just so bizarre.
Well, one thing that I find interesting is that Ed always denied that he never had sex with the bodies. He says he never ever had sex with the bodies, and he explained this by saying they smelled too bad.
Ugh.
But he eventually did admit to shooting Mary Hogan in 1954.
Yeah, but he couldn't remember any of the details.
He just remembered that he like came out of it and he was dragging her body across the floor.
He was suspected in several other murders, but nothing that stuck.
Yeah.
But there was one or two other local girls that did disappear from La Crosse.
One in particular was Evelyn Hartley, and she was a babysitter in La Crosse, and he was considered a suspect in the 1953 disappearance of her.
Regardless, his trial began on November 21st, 1957, and he was charged with first-degree murder. But of course, he pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, and well, he was insane.
Yeah, he was actually diagnosed with schizophrenia and was found mentally incompetent and unfit for trial.
Now, the thing about that is they were all diagnosed with schizophrenia at this time.
Yeah.
That was like a broad stroke.
Everyone was diagnosed with schizophrenia at that point. So he was actually sent to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane, which still exists. It's now called the Dodge Correctional Institution, and it's a maximum security facility in Waupun, Wisconsin. He was later transferred to the Mendota State Hospital in Madison, Wisconsin. And so that was in 1957, and it wasn't until 1968 that the doctors determined Ed was mentally able to confer with counsel and participate in his defense. That's an exact quote of what he was considered to be.
Orderlies and stuff described him as a model patient, that he was kind and well behaved, and where he would have odd episodes. He wasn't violent or aggressive. A guy would go in and enjoy playing board games with him that I heard give an interview. I think he was one of the orderlies. I could be wrong.
But if you think about it, like, okay, so what he did was horrible, but the only 2 murders that we know for sure he did were 2. Which is like borderline on him even being a serial killer, if we're being honest.
Him's definitely a grave robber.
Yeah.
Regardless, he tried again to get out. That didn't happen.
On November 7th of 1968, his second trial began, and that one only lasted 1 week. And a psychiatrist testified that Ed had told him that he didn't know whether the killing of Bernice was intentional or accidental. Mm-hmm. And he told them that he was examining a gun at Bernice's store, and the gun just went off. He said that he'd been trying to load a bullet into the rifle and it discharged. And he said that he had not aimed the rifle at Bernice and didn't remember anything else that had happened that morning. Now, that's really common with serial killers, is it's a disassociation. And if they have that, it usually does mean there's something like mental going on, but that's a very human thing to do, is to disassociate bad memories. Mm-hmm. I don't know what his motivation would have been to kill her. He may have literally just blacked out and killed her.
Again, we'll never know.
I know.
I kind of believe that had he never been caught, that he would have continued to kill, because I think at this point, there was something else that it wasn't about killing.
No, I don't think it was about killing either. I think it was about his things. So during his trial, his defense actually requested that he not have a jury, and they just wanted the judge to make the decisions. So he was actually found guilty on November 14th of 1968. Then third trial had to be held to deal with Ed's sanity issues. So after all the doctors for the prosecution and the defense made their cases, Gallmer actually ruled Ed as not guilty by reason of insanity and ordered him committed to the Central State Hospital for the Criminally Insane for life.
Yeah, I didn't get any of that bit.
Judge Gallmer actually said, due to prohibitive costs, Ed was tried for only 1 murder, that of Bernice, even though he had also admitted to killing Mary. But at this point, why try him for both? He's already going away for life. But he did die due to lung cancer at that hospital. No, actually at the Mendota Mental Health Institute on July 26th of 1984 at the age of 77.
In death, he got what he always wanted, which was to be back with his mother.
Yep.
And he was buried next to her. In the year 2000, some hooligans came and stole his fucking headstone.
Yeah.
Because people are fucking weird.
Yep.
And don't have boundaries and serial killer memorabilia, which, listen, y'all, if we have any of you people that are like that listening to this fucking podcast, that is not okay. Don't do that. That's not what this is about. If you feel like you are somebody who's doing that, I need you to go and talk to your therapist now. What does Bailey Sarian always say? Get better idols.
Get better idols, with lots of hand clap.
So somebody steals his headstone, they find it a year later, and now it's in storage.
Another fun fact, in 1958, his house and possessions were actually scheduled to be auctioned off, but on the morning of March 20th, the house was burned to the ground.
Act of God? Angry townsperson? Who knows?
Arson was 100% suspected, but the cause of the fire was never officially determined, and when Ed learned of the incident, he shrugged and said, just as well.
I mean, Can't say I blame him.
Oh, and then Ed's 1949 Ford sedan, which is what he used to haul the bodies of his victims, was sold at public auction for $760, which is the equivalent of like $6,700 in 2019. And a carnival operator, Bunny Gibbons, charged carnival goers 25 cents admission to see it.
Yeah, well, so that was part of the reason why the townspeople committed the arson, allegedly. Was because they didn't want people coming to town. They didn't want serial killer tourism.
Right.
They didn't want Ed Gein tourism. They were already dealing with the Geiners. Is that what they called? The jokes that they would tell?
Yes, they would. I heard one of the Geiners, and it was, why is the heat always turned up in Ed Gein's house?
Why?
They don't want the furniture to get goosebumps.
Oh my God. Oh God.
People would kind of get offended by it, but it was kind of the townsfolk way of like dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
Some people, I mean us included, how do you deal with trauma, Christina?
Displaced feelings and bad humor.
Yep.
So, Chelsea, on our Dahmer scale,
Yes.
what do you give him? He's a hard one to rate.
He's a solid 8 for me. 8 to 9. Only because of what he did with the bodies.
So, as a serial killer, he's like a 2. As a person, he's a 10 out of 10.
I do see what you mean there. I can't get around the horror show.
Yeah. Like, as a criminally insane person whose insanity shows itself in really weird furniture building.
Right?
Nasty. He's nasty.
I do have a little blurb of all the pop culture references that he is accredited for.
Oh, okay, go ahead. Fill us
So
in.
this is from Wikipedia. The tale first came to widespread public attention in the fictionalized version presented by Robert Bloch in his 1959 suspense novel Psycho.
Oh, yeah, and then a year later, Alfred Hitchcock made it into the movie.
Gein's story was loosely adapted into numerous films, including Deranged, 1974, In the Light of the Moon in 2000, and it was released in the United States and Australia as Ed Gein in 2001, Ed Gein, The Butcher of Plainfield in 2007, and the Rob Zombie films House of a Thousand Corpses.
Oh, I forgot about House of a Thousand Corpses.
And its sequel, The Devil's Rejects. Gein served as the inspiration for myriad fictional serial killers, most notably Norman Bates from Psycho, Leatherface from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Buffalo Bill from The Silence of the Lambs, and the character Dr. Oliver Thredson from the TV series American Horror Story Asylum.
I did not even think about that.
I didn't catch this little tidbit. So American filmmaker Errol Morris and German filmmaker Werner Herzog attempted unsuccessfully to collaborate on a film project about Gein from 1975 to 1976. Morris actually interviewed Gein several times and ended up spending almost a year in Plainfield interviewing dozens of locals. The pair planned to secretly exhume Gein's mother from her grave to test a theory, but never followed through on the scheme and eventually ended their collab.
That's weird.
The character Patrick Bateman in the 2000 film American Psycho mistakenly attributes a quote by Edmund Kemper to Gein.
Oh, I've heard this one.
You know what Ed Gein said about women? Oh, yeah. When I see a pretty girl walking down the street, I think two things. One part of me wants to take her out, talk to her, be real nice and sweet and treat her right. The other part wonders what her head would look like on a stick.
Yeah, if you know Kemper, you know that's exactly what something Kemper would fucking say.
That is 1000% something Kemper would say.
Okay, so fuck all this shit. Let's do a palate cleanser. Palate cleanser. This is the palate cleanser. What did Ed Gein say to the cop who arrested him?
What?
Have a heart.
It's fine. I'm just dying over here. No big deal. It's a picture of Hannibal Lecter, and it says, me watching everyone buy all the food. Yes, plump up for daddy.
Oh my god.
When you paid extra for soundproofing, but you can still hear the screams from the trunk. What do alcoholics and necrophiliacs have in common?
Oh god, what?
They both fight the urge to crack open a cold one.
Oh my god. Ew. I want to make a lampshade out of your skin because you light up my life.
Oh no. Thanks for joining us on our first episode of season 2. And if you're still here and sticking around with us, just know that we appreciate y'all and your support.
Don't get the corona.
Yeah, please stay safe. Practice social distancing. Wash your damn hands.
Stay in your fucking house.
Yeah, don't go out unless you have to.
Yeah, come on,
Seriously.
guys. Seriously. Team effort.
If you want to support our podcast, you can follow us on all our social media accounts. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at The Killer T. You can also leave us a review on iTunes.
And that's everything.
That's everything.
All right, y'all. Until next time.
Bye. Join us next week where we discuss the unsolved case of the Scranton Strangler.